Hi guys, welcome back to this week's Yarntopia tutorial. We are talking about corner to corner this time around, something that I've had quite a few people ask how to do. We have run a face-to-face workshop on it before. This is what we're looking at. So this is a scarf that I made quite a while ago. You can do big squares, scarves. A lot of people use corner to corner when they're making graph gans. You can get yourself a piece of graph paper and you could design your own. There's absolutely loads of things that you can do. All it is, essentially, is these little squares. So we just start with one in the corner and then we slowly build up, working diagonally, backwards and forwards. And it gives you this really nice pattern. And it has a really nice texture to it as well. It's different. It's one of my favourites. It's really quick and easy to work up once you master it. There's only two things that you need to learn, which is building your squares, and then the next step is once it is as wide as you want it, so this isn't very wide with it being for a scarf, you can make them wide enough to fit on a king size bed if you wanted to. Second step is learning how to actually decrease to give it that nice square shape. So if this was squared off, we would start working until it's as wide as we want, which would take us up here, for example, and then we'd learn how to decrease it down to give us that nice square shape. So we've got a little sample here, so you can see a bit more up close. It's just all these little interlocking squares. You can use any type of yarn for this. I prefer double knit, but you could do this in a chunky. You could do, if you were doing sort of a summery type scarf, you could do this in a 4-ply. What I do suggest, just from my own trial and error, is that you use a hook slightly smaller, by about half a size, to what is recommended on the yarn. So if you're working with a double knit that recommends a 4.5, then I suggest you use a 4, just because it makes it a little less gappy in between the squares. So I've got some yarn and I have my 4mm hook. I like these ones with the textured grip just because it's less strain on your joints and your thumb, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of crochet. And the first thing that we need to do is we need to start with a slip knot and a chain 6. There's lots of different ways of making a slip knot. I know everybody has their own preferred way, so whatever works for you, it's absolutely fine. And we're just going to do a very simple chain 6. And then we are going to skip the 3 chains closest to the hook. So 1, 2, 3. And in our 4th chain, we're going to place 1 double crochet. Just yarn over, insert your hook, pull it back through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So that's our first double crochet. We're going to put a double crochet in each of these last 2 chains as well. So we'll have that chain 3 that we skipped and then 3 double crochets. Don't worry if your first square starts to curl a little bit like mine has. It will straighten out as we go along. But there you have your first little square for your corner to corner. So now what we have to do is we have to build a new square. We're going to do that exactly the same way as we've just done. So we're going to chain 6. We're going to skip the 3 chains closest to the hook, and we're going to put a double crochet in each of the next 3. So 1, 2, and 3. So now we've got these 2 little squares. They don't really look like much at the moment. But what we need to do is this first square, we have to turn it upside down. And now that chain 3 that we skipped is at the top here. And you've got a little gap in between the chain 3 and your first double crochet that you did. What we're going to do is we're going to slip stitch to join these 2 squares together. So you're just going to insert your hook, grab your yarn, pull it through, and pull it through the loop that was on your hook. So now you've got these 2 little squares. On one of them, your stitches going horizontally, and on the other one, they look vertical. That's what you want to see. Now what we're going to do is we're going to build a square on top of this first square. So like in our sample piece, we have our first square and our second square, and we've just joined them together. So now we need to build this square right here. We're going to do that by doing a chain 3, and then placing 3 double crochets all into this space right here where we've just joined the 2 squares together. So 1, 2, and 3. Just like this. So now that we're back on this edge, we have to build a brand new square, and that's a chain 6, like when we built these first 2 squares. So like we did before, I'm going to chain 6, I'm going to skip these first 3, and we're going to put 1 double crochet in each of the next 3. So, like when we were down here, we had to turn things around a little bit. We need to do the same thing, because this new little square is sort of floating just in the air. It's not really attached to anything. And we do it exactly the same as what we did before. So, this square below, we find this chain 3 before we did our 3 double crochet, and we're going to slip stitch them together. So you just sort of turn it upside down on itself, and slip stitch it together. So I'm going to go back and show you that again. For me, that's the trickiest little bit to remember. So when you're building a new square, we're going to have to flip it round and join it to this chain 3 space with just a slip stitch. And now it's a case of filling in and joining together. So when we're filling in, we just do a chain 3 and then place 3 double crochets into that same space where we join 2 squares together. So 1, 2 and 3. And then again, we're going to find the little space right at the top of our next square, and we're just going to slip stitch them together. And we're going to repeat this square again, so chain 3 and 3 double crochets into the space where we joined. 1, 2 and 3. It kind of looks a little bit like stairs. So 1, 2, 3. So now that we're back on an edge, like we discussed last time, we have to build a brand new square. And we do that with the chain 6. The only time you do this chain 6 is when you are on an edge building a brand new square to add an extra row. On all the ones in between, when we're filling these in, we do the chain 3. So because we're on an edge and we're going to build a brand new square, it's going to be a chain 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again, we're going to skip the 3 closest to the hook, and we're going to put a double crochet in each of the next 3. And that's our new square built. And just like we did before, we have to turn this round and find our chain 3 space and join them together with a slip stitch. And now we're back onto filling in our little steps and working our way back along the row. So we just repeat the chain 3 and 3 double crochets for each square. And then we find the top chain 3 space of the next square and we slip stitch them together. And then we repeat that process, so chain 3 and 3 double crochets into that little space. And again, we find the top of the square next to us and we slip stitch them together. And then one last time for this row, we do a chain 3 and 3 double crochets into that space. Sorry if I'm going a little bit quick for you, some of you guys. You can just go back or just pause it and have a play until you get the hang of it. But that now is our 4th row completed. You would keep repeating this process, so that now that we're back on that edge, we would do a chain 6, skip 3 chains, 1 double crochet into each of the next 3 chains, and that would give us our new box. And we would turn this and join it on with a slip stitch into this space right here. To fill in, we would do our chain 3s, 3 double crochets, join to the top of the next square with a slip stitch, chain 3, 3 double crochets. We would repeat that all the way until we're back at the end, and then we would start to build our next new square for our next row. And we'd keep going like this until your project like I said before, is as wide as you are wanting it. So if you're wanting a scarf, this is the width that I usually choose. It's nice and comfortable, and it would be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. About 11 rows, about 11 squares wide. If you were doing a rectangle, the one thing that you need to remember is that you start decreasing on this side, but continue to increase on this side, so that we get a nice long rectangle. If you were making a square, once this was the width that you wanted, so say for a blanket, decide when you're happy with the width, and then you would stop increasing altogether, and you would just work on the decrease. I'm going to show you how to do the decrease now, but obviously if you're working on your project and not just making a little sample like I am, this is where you'd stop. You'd carry on increasing and building these rows until you get to a point where you want to stop. So if this was our last row, so we've made this as big as it's going to be, and we've got to the last box on the last row, we're going to start decreasing now. Sometimes it helps to use a stitch marker just on the edge so that you know you've got to the edge. Sometimes you get a little bit carried away and you end up adding extra squares that shouldn't be there. Oh, sorry about that, guys. If you are making a rectangle, sometimes it helps to place the stitch marker on your short side so that you remember which is the side you've stopped increasing on already and which is the side that you need to continue with. You can use just about anything as a stitch marker. A lot of people already have them. You can use a hair grip, you can use a bit of thread. Me personally, I like these guys, just little lockable stitch markers. You can buy them online. They are relatively cheap. You just pop it in. And then these ones actually lock closed, which is great because while you're working, you don't have to worry about them slipping out. If you put your project down to go do something else, you don't have to worry. You can also use these as a yarn stopper. So if I've decided I need to take a break, I can just pop this in here, lock it off, and my yarn can't come out of my project. I'm not going to have to worry about losing stitches if it gets caught anywhere. They're really handy to have. Right, so for the decrease section, let's just get some extra yarn there. So what we're going to do is we're not going to build a new square this time. We are going to turn our work around, and in between the double crochets that we've made on this square, we are going to slip stitch. So we're going to slip stitch our way across to this corner. And there's 3 little spaces. I'm just going to slip stitch our way across those. So slip stitch is just pick up your yarn and pull it through the loop on your hook. Now, if your corner to corner is planning on having a border, you want to try and make sure that you keep these slip stitches quite loose so that when it comes to putting a border on your corner to corner, you're not going to have to worry about them being really tight and you're not being able to use these little slip stitches. So I've done 3 little slip stitches just to get me across to this corner space. And now we're going to turn our work again. So we're looking at it like the steps. And we're just going to use the filling in to build these steps back up. So that, if you remember, was a chain 3. And then 3 double crochets into that space. So it's 1, 2, and 3. And then we're back to our joining together with a slip stitch and filling in another square. So chain 3 and then 3 double crochets. And you're just going to carry on like that all the way to the other end of this row. You have to remember with these, the rows are worked diagonally. So you are working backwards and forwards. If you were designing your own graph, you have to remember that you would be working up and back down, up and back down along your graph paper. You can do absolutely loads with corner to corner. It's why I love it so much. There are tons of patterns online for graph gans where you can put different pictures into your blanket or your scarf or whatever it is that you're making with this. There's also a really good website that I like called Stitch Fiddle. There are quite a few variations of it, but Stitch Fiddle is the one that I've found quite user-friendly. So you can take either a picture that you already have, or you can custom design the picture yourself on there. It's like interactive graph paper. It's really good. You can choose the size that you would like it. Absolutely all sorts, but what it does is it creates the graph for you to follow. And you see, because I was talking and getting distracted, I've just made a little mistake here, which is actually really good because then I can show you. So I've got 4 squares along the bottom and I want to keep it that way so that it's 4 by 4. And now I got carried away when I got up to the top here, and I actually filled in the extra square that I shouldn't have done. So I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is not going to get me a square, it's going to get me a rectangle. So if you were making the rectangle, this is what you would do. And then you would build a new square here, and you would bring it back down only to here. But we're not doing a rectangle today, we're doing a square. So I need to undo that last square that I made back to where I joined the 2 squares together, because this is as far as I wanted to go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I repeat what I did before, where I turn my work around and I slip stitch across to the corner of this square. So it's 3 little slip stitches, and you remember you're going in between your stitches to do your slip stitch. I'll just turn it around again, and I'm going to fill in these squares like before with a chain 3. And then 3 double crochets. So I'm going to concentrate now so that I don't make mistakes. And fill in this last square. Join them together. Get some more yarn. And then again, because we're decreasing, I would turn my work around, and in between the stitches I would do a slip stitch. So 1, 2 and 3, just to get me back to that little corner there. And then my last square would be a chain 3 and 3 double crochets into that space. And then join to the next square, and that would be complete. Now, one of the things I like to do, because they're not perfect on the edge, they're not perfectly straight, just because of the turning that we have to do and the slip stitches. But one of the things that you can do is you can add just a little border all the way around your work, and that would just neaten everything up. And the simplest one for that is single crochet. For each of these squares that have their space on the edge, just do 3 single crochet, and for each of these squares that don't, I just go right into the top of the stitch, so right there on the top of the stitch, and just do single crochets. And because each of our squares are built with 3 double crochets, you can just put 1 stitch into each of the 3, and it keeps it nice and even that you've got 3 single crochets along the edge of each square. Your corner one, if you've done borders on blankets before, you can use whichever preferred method that works for you. What I normally do is I normally do 3 single crochet down this side, add 1 extra on the end so that it goes nicely round the corner, and then as I turn it round I do another 3 along this side. So it would be 3, 1 extra for the corner, and then another 3. And you just repeat that all the way around. And borders are great because they just neaten things up a little bit, especially with corner to corner. But that's it. That's the increase and the decrease for how to make your own corner to corner. If you guys have a go, even if it's just a sample square, take a picture, pop it in the comments, let me see what you guys have been working on. If you have any questions, if you need any help, drop me a comment. Excuse me, sorry. But yeah, it looks really complicated, it looks really fancy depending on the yarn that you use, but it's not fancy to do. It is really, really easy. It's just remembering those little techniques for the increase and decrease, making your squares. Try and keep it as even as possible. If you are going to design your own, then a sample square is a good way to go. Sample square will give you an idea based on your tension how long your work is. So if you say you want to design one that's 50 squares, but you don't know how big that's going to be, you can actually measure your sample, and that'll help you figure out how big your overall project is going to be. You can use lots of different online programs, like I mentioned Stitch Fiddle earlier. Stitch Fiddle's great. Lots of different websites have tutorials, have patterns on how to custom make your own graphs using corner to corner. Go explore, go experiment. Let me know how you find it, and we will be back again next Sunday with another tutorial. Keep your eyes on the Yarntopia page on Facebook. I will be sharing later on in the week exactly what that tutorial is going to be. And we will see you guys soon. Stay safe in lockdown. Hope you're all doing well. Talk to you later.